Imagine this. Strapped to a cold gurney in a dimly lit chamber, a 61-year-old man mumbles his final words, barely audible pleas for forgiveness that echo with decades of regret. Or are they just empty whispers? What eerie, everyday meal did he choose as his last, and why did it feel so hauntingly ordinary in the face of death? This is the chilling end of John Fitzgerald Hanson, the career criminal whose brutal 1999 crime spree shattered lives in Tulsa, Oklahoma, claiming a beloved grandmother and a heroic bystander in a whirlwind of senseless violence. For 26 years, he dodged the needle through legal battles and political twists, but on June 12, 2025, justice finally caught up in a way that sparked furious debates over the death penalty power and redemption. What secrets did those mumbled words stick around to uncover the exact phrase that left witnesses stunned, his bizarre final meal, and the twisted path that led him there? If true crime's dark mysteries keep you up at night, smash that subscribe button. We're just getting started. Early life, a path paved with trouble. John Fitzgerald Hanson, born George John Hanson on April 8, 1964, entered the world in a time of cultural upheaval, the swinging 60s, but his upbringing was far from glamorous. Details about his childhood are scarce, shrouded in the anonymity that often accompanies those who fade into the criminal underbelly. What we do know paints a picture of a man whose life veered off course, early influenced perhaps by the socio-economic struggles common in mid-20th century America. Hanson grew up in Oklahoma, a state known for its oil booms and busts, where opportunity could be as fleeting as a prairie wind. By his late teens, Hanson was already entangled with the law. Records show his criminal history began in earnest around 1983 when he was just 19 years old. That year marked the start of a 7-year streak of convictions that would define his young adulthood. He was nailed for robbery, likely petty holdups driven by desperation or thrill and assault, suggesting a propensity for violence that simmered beneath the surface. These weren't isolated incidents. From 1983 to 1990, Hanson racked up multiple charges, serving time in various correctional facilities across Oklahoma. Imagine a young man barely out of his teens cycling through the system, arrests, court appearances, short stints behind bars, and releases that only led back to the streets. What drove him? Poverty, a lack of education, family dysfunction. Public records don't delve deep into his psyche, but patterns in similar cases point to a cocktail of factors. Hanson wasn't a high-profile gangster, he was more of a drifter scraping by on the fringes of society. By the early 1990s, after his last known conviction in 1990, he seemed to go quiet, at least on paper. Perhaps he laid low working odd jobs or blending into everyday life. But, as we'll see, this hiatus was merely a lull before the storm. Hanson wasn't reformed. He was waiting, perhaps unknowingly, for the wrong partnership to ignite his darkest impulses. Fast forward to the late 1990s. Hanson, now in his mid-30s, crossed paths with Victor Cornell Miller, a man whose own rap sheet read like a cautionary tale. Miller, born on January 18, 1963, had a history that eclipsed Hanson's in severity. In 1981, at age 18, Miller was convicted of first-degree murder, though it was later reduced to second degree, allowing his release in 1997 after serving about 16 years. Fresh out of prison, Miller wasn't rehabilitated. He was primed for trouble. The two men, both hardened by the system, formed a deadly alliance. They weren't masterminds, they were opportunistic predators fueled by a shared disregard for human life. This partnership would culminate in one of Tulsa's most infamous crime sprees. But before we get to that fateful day, consider this. What if Hanson's early brushes with the law had been met with intervention instead of incarceration? Could his trajectory have changed? It's a question that haunts true crime stories like this one. Hang on, because the events of August 31, 1999 will show just how far he had fallen. The crime. A day of terror in Tulsa. August 31, 1999 started like any other late summer day in Tulsa, Oklahoma, a city buzzing with everyday routines from mall shopping to business dealings. But for Hanson and Miller, it was a day primed for chaos. The duo had already kicked things off with robberies at 2 local liquor stores, netting quick cash and emboldening their recklessness. High on adrenaline and armed with a .38 caliber revolver and a 9mm semi-automatic pistol, they prowled for their next target. Their sights landed on 77-year-old Mary Agnes Bowles, a pillar of the community. Mary was a retired bank executive known for her volunteer work as the former president of the St. Francis Hospital Auxiliary. Widowed and independent, she was simply running errands at the Tulsa Promenade Mall. As she approached her car in the parking lot that evening, Hanson and Miller struck. In a swift carjacking, they forced her into her own vehicle at gunpoint. Miller took the wheel while Hanson sat in the back holding the terrified elderly woman hostage. What followed was a nightmare drive north toward Owasso, a suburb just outside Tulsa. They headed to a remote dirt pit, a desolate spot used for excavation far from prying eyes. But fate intervened in the form of 44-year-old Gerald Max Thurman, the pit's owner, and a hardworking head of a local trucking company. Thurman, spotting the suspicious vehicle on his property, did what any responsible citizen might. He made a phone call to report it. That act of vigilance cost him dearly. Miller, panicking or enraged, confronted Thurman and unleashed 4 shots from the revolver. Thurman collapsed gravely wounded, but he wouldn't succumb immediately. He lingered in the hospital for 2 agonizing weeks before dying on September 14 in 1999. Meanwhile, just a short distance away, Hanson dragged Mary Bowles to the roadside. With cold precision, he fired 4 to 6 rounds from the 9mm pistol, killing her instantly. The killers made a half-hearted attempt to conceal her body with branches, but it was sloppy work born of haste and indifference. Why these victims? Why this brutality? Prosecutors later argued it was a crime of opportunity escalated by the need to eliminate witnesses. Hanson and Miller weren't content with the carjacking. They wanted no loose ends. But their spree didn't end there. 8 days later, on September 8, 1999, they robbed a credit union, adding federal charges to their growing list of offenses. The community reeled. Mary's family described her as a loving grandmother whose life was stolen in her golden years. Gerald's loved ones mourned a family man cut down in his prime. Tulsa, a city no stranger to crime, was outraged. Police launched a massive manhunt, but the killer's luck was running out. Bowles' body was discovered on September 7th, decomposed but identifiable. Fingerprints on her abandoned car pointed straight to Hanson and Miller. Arrest came swiftly on September 9th, 1999 at a seedy local motel. A search uncovered the smoking guns, literally, the revolver and pistol hidden in a toilet tank wrapped in plastic. Ballistics would later confirm they were the murder weapons. Hanson and Miller were charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder each, plus the federal bank robbery. The stage was set for justice, but as you'll see, the road to the gurney was long and twisted. What secrets did Hanson harbor during his interrogation? Did he show remorse? Keep watching the trial. Revelations are chilling. Investigation, arrest, and trial. The wheels of justice turn. The investigation moved at breakneck speed. Tulsa police, aided by federal agents due to the bank robbery, pieced together the puzzle. Witnesses from the liquor stores provided descriptions, and Thurman's phone call log sealed the timeline. Hanson's fingerprints on Bowles' car were the nail in the coffin. Both men were interrogated separately, but neither cracked under pressure, at least not enough to avoid trial. Hanson's trial kicked off in May 2001 in Tulsa County District Court. Prosecutors painted him as the triggerman in Bowles' death, emphasizing his cold-blooded execution-style shooting. The jury didn't take long. On May 18, 2001, they found him guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder. Sentencing followed on May 23rd, death for Bowles' murder life without parole for Thurman's. The death penalty was justified by aggravating factors. The murders were heinous and committed to avoid arrest. Miller's trial in April 2002 mirrored Hanson's, resulting in the same verdicts: death for Bowles, life for Thurman. But here's where their paths diverged. Miller's appeals were a roller coaster. His convictions overturned in 2004, retried in 2008 with another death sentence, then commuted and adjusted until by 2015 prosecutors dropped the death penalty. Today, Miller rots in life without parole at Oklahoma State Reformatory. Hanson's appeals were equally protracted but less successful. In 2003, the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals vacated his death sentence, citing issues with jury instructions leading to a resentencing in January 2006, where death was reaffirmed. He fought on appealing to federal courts. The U.S. District Court denied in 2013, the 10th Circuit, in 2015 the Supreme Court in 2016, and a final rejection in 2021. Hanson even joined a lawsuit challenging Oklahoma's lethal injection protocol, dismissed in 2022. Throughout, Hanson maintained a low profile on death row. Transferred to federal custody for his bank robbery life sentence at USP Pollock in Louisiana, he became a pawn in political shifts. His 2022 execution date was stayed when the Biden administration refused to hand him over. But with Donald Trump's return to office in 2025, Oklahoma, A.G. Gentner Drummond pushed for transfer approved by USA to Pam Bondi on February 13, 2025. Hanson arrived at Oklahoma State Penitentiary on March 3rd, his fate sealed for June 12th. What was life like on death row? For 26 years, isolation regrets perhaps spiritual reflection. Sources suggest Hanson mellowed, but details are sparse. His clemency plea was denied, setting the stage for the end. Up next, the haunting details of his last day, including a meal that screams ordinary in the face of death. Death row, last meal, final words, and execution. June 12, 2025 dawned as Hanson's final day. At 61, he was a shadow of the 35-year-old killer from 1999, aged by time appeals and the weight of his crimes. Oklahoma's execution protocol is clinical lethal injection with a 3-drug cocktail at the state penitentiary in McAllister. Hanson declined a special last meal, a choice that speaks volumes. Instead, he ate the standard prison tray served the evening before: chicken pot pie, 2 fruit cups, and 2 rolls. No extravagant requests like steak or lobster, just institutional fare, perhaps a final act of indifference or resignation. In the world of death row last meals, it's eerily mundane, contrasting the gravity of his impending fate. As witnesses gathered, media officials, and victims' families, Hanson was strapped to the gurney. Strapped down, he mumbled his final statement. Accounts vary slightly due to his low volume, but the essence was clear. He asked for forgiveness, then uttered, "Peace to everyone." Some heard it as, "Just forgive me," followed by the peace wish. It was brief, lacking the dramatic flair of some infamous last words, but it hinted at remorse after decades of denial. Media witnesses noted a sense of closure for the families. One relative called it good to hear some remorse. At 10:11 a.m., the drugs flowed, a sedative, paralytic, and heart stopper. Hanson was pronounced dead minutes later. Oklahoma's 17th execution. Since resuming the death penalty in 2021, it marked the end of a saga intertwined with political wins, Trump's policies enabling what Biden had delayed. John Fitzgerald Hanson's story isn't just about one man's fall. It's a mirror to society's failures and triumphs. From a troubled youth marked by early crimes to a deadly partnership that stole 2 lives, his path underscores how unchecked patterns escalate. Mary Bowles and Gerald Thurman weren't statistics, they were beloved individuals whose deaths left voids that time can't fill. Yet, in his final mumbled words, we glimpse humanity's complexity. Even monsters seek peace. Was it genuine or a last-ditch plea? That's for you to decide. If this tale gripped you, like and comment below. What do you think drove Hanson? Should politics influence executions? Subscribe for more deep dives into prisoner stories from crimes to final breaths. Until next time, remember, every life has a story, but some end in shadows.